I'm going to read some quotes to you, however, even though we don't have time for me to actually give the full presentation that I had in mind tonight, because I want you to appreciate the problems that our founders of this country had, the people had in establishing this country, and you'll find it very interesting. And I'll quote both Samuel and John Adams. You see, I think John Adams probably was the best president we ever had. I say that for a number of different reasons, but the primary reason was he was the one president that fought the antecedents of the conspiracy we fight today more than any other president of the United States. There were only 4 presidents that fought the conspiracy, and they were George Washington, John Adams, Andrew Johnson, and Warren Harding. Now, you can say that these individuals may have had their particular problems hither and yon, but they were the only ones that tried to do something about this conspiracy we fight today. No, none of the others ever did. None of them. But John Adams did it more, and Abigail Adams did it more than anyone else. But Samuel Adams said this. I find this astonishing. Among the natural rights are these. First, a right to life. Secondly, to liberty. Thirdly, to property. Together with the right to support and defend them in the best manner they can. What's changed? Isn't that exactly what we're involved in today? And he listed that first one, the right to life. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that a basic battle that we have even today? A right to life not only before you're born, but when you're aged, instead of euthanasia and that sort of thing. And we know that people who disrespect life at both ends will kill it in the middle too. Right. Adolf Hitler started that way. Look what he did, and everything else. It's very interesting that these were the values, these were the concerns at the founding of this nation, and they remain the same today. Another quote of Samuel Adams, it says, and this is very, very important for what we're doing today, it does not require a majority to prevail, but rather an irate, tireless minority, keen to set brush fires in people's minds. Isn't that what we're doing? I mean, he's describing the basic strategy of the John Birch Society, maybe oversimplistic a little bit from the actual organization that Robert Welch formed, but he's telling us this is how it's done because that's the way it was done then. We know that in those years, in the War of Independence, that only 3% of the people actually got involved in the war in one capacity or another. 3%. A tireless minority. And that's all we need today, because we know that only 5% get involved in anything besides their church or job. 5% run the community. If you get 3 out of 5 of that percent, 3%, you've got it. Because they make things happen, you get to them. How many here have ever been doorbelled by a member of the Communist Party? Why? Because they don't think you're important. You know who they go and doorbell? The city council, the teachers, the Cub Scout leaders, anybody and everybody in the community who is an opinion molder. Because they know if they capture that majority, those 5%ers, if they get the majority of those 5%ers, they win. We should do likewise. Samuel Adams also said, all might be free if they valued freedom and defended it as they should. That is the reason why that they are dumbing down the American student today so they do not value freedom. They don't even understand it. They tout it, they put it on signs, but when it comes right down to it, they haven't got a Chinaman's chance of understanding what freedom means. They don't. They think it's license. When they write freedom on a sign, really, you and I understand that definition, the way they look at it, as license, and that is not freedom. But I want to end up with this particular quote by John Adams, because it's something that we have to take to heart today relative to the work that we're doing, and have that resolve in our heart to win this battle, just like they won their battle when it looked like there was no hope. Almost every point up to the end, that last few months, the surrender of Cornwallis, until that point it looked hopeless. They couldn't win. They didn't have enough to pull it off. But they had resolve, you see. And this is the kind of resolve they had, quoting John Adams. Let us disappoint the men who are raising themselves upon the ruin of this country. Does that sound like what's going on today? That people are raising themselves up on the ruin of this country. I don't care if you look around at the politicians, that's what they're doing. The Obamas, the Wall Street bankers, and I hate the term the bankers, because, ladies and gentlemen, a lot of the bankers are suffering worse than we in this room are suffering who have banks, and the federal government is doing everything they can to put them out of business, so there's only ultimately one bank. Okay? So don't always refer to the bankers. There are a lot of family banks, a lot of single owner banks, that kind of thing in your communities that are really on the edge, and they deserve our support. But in even those days, they wanted to build on the ruin of the country, to elevate themselves. And that's what's happening here today. It's no different today than what they experienced then. It's just that we have never studied history in that context. That is the biggest problem with studying history today in this country, is we have lost the context of Americanism in our study. And that includes homeschooling, ladies and gentlemen. Even homeschooling history is very, very deficient, because they are victims of the same problems that all the other people who study history in public schools have. Most of it's gone down the memory hole from the context of liberty, from the context of what they're trying to do to our country. You in this room are so important. Let me give you an example. You'll see it in the next bulletin, but I'll mention it to you now. What the John Birch Society did in the 1960s and 1970s hurt the conspiracy so badly, they could not reach their goals. Their original goal was 1976, was pushed back to 1980, 82, 87, 2000, finally 2010. And they've missed all those goals because of you in this room. Because you hit them where it was strategic, where they were strategically weak. And one of those things was the Support Your Local Police program. You cannot have a world government unless you subjugate the American people and wipe out the American system. You cannot do that unless you have a national police to enforce a totalitarian government. If you do not have a national police, you cannot therefore subjugate the rest of the world, because you are very important. They can't subjugate the world until they subjugate the United States citizens. That's what made that program vital and important, and they had to pretend that communism went away to give themselves time to consolidate, infiltrate, dumb down more, and come back later when we had gone to sleep. Well, we're not asleep. And the American nation is not asleep. They're waking up more and more. Now, I've seen 3 or 4 waves of protest amongst the citizens of this country in my lifetime. And let me tell you, it's my belief in all cases before the current one, they were controlled. They were like a pressure cooker under steam, and they allowed the steam to dissipate, the pressure to dissipate under their control, and divert it into meaningless and ineffective action. And I could name names, I could name organizations, but believe me, I've been on the inside of a couple of them to realize that these things were very, very phony. And the Christian Coalition is one of them. The leadership of that organization sold out the American people to a fare thee will. And you can decide who I'm talking about in your own mind, but I saw it in action behind the scenes. This is the first time it's been from the grassroots, and they're having trouble getting their arms about it, but believe me, they're trying very hard to get their arms around what we would call today the Tea Party movement, which is a very loose term if you really look at it. But they're doing everything they can, expending a great deal of money and organization to get it under control, because they didn't start it, you see. And freedom, the keen desire for liberty, is a very difficult animal to put into a cage when enough people know about it, when they feel that in their heart and have the inspiration to go out and do something. And that's the thing that we're going to have to capitalize on. And it's a thing that we can really set the course to save this country. There are a lot of people out there ready. They're ready to do something. They're ready to get involved. They're beginning to understand that, wait a minute, there's more behind this than what we've noticed in the past. That, yeah, this is by design. This is not an accident. This is not stupidity. These people really know what they're doing, and they're doing it to me and my kids and my job and my company. And they don't like it. All we have to do is get to them, show them what's wrong, but give them the real solutions to what's wrong. Nothing short term. Those things never work. We don't need to amend the Constitution. We don't need a balanced budget. It's called the Constitution. If you live up to the Constitution, that is a balanced budget, is it not? How many here believe that the government pays any attention and follows the Second Amendment of the United States? Any? Yeah, no? What do you think that the federal government and the Congress, and they follow the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution? No. How about the Fifth? What about the Ninth? Well, how about the 10th, at least? No? Well, what makes anybody believe they'll follow a new amendment that is sold as a solution to the problems we have, unless we get them to obey the Constitution that already exists? The layers of strength are growing, and we have programs that will help it grow. Our New American Opinion Foundation, the Freedom Project Education, a number of things like that that we're getting involved in. Those things will help build that layer of strength through understanding of what the Constitution is and get real good, solid education out to the kids. There are a number of things of that nature that we can be doing and doing well. Agenda 21, would you think that anybody who gets involved in Agenda 21 for more than an hour won't figure out that there's a conspiracy? It's obvious when you get involved in Agenda 21 that this is by design. They put it all in writing, what they intend to do. It is so outrageous, it's very difficult to believe that they would put it in writing. But there it is. Pick it up, look at their books, their publications, their videos, and so on and so forth. They would lay it right out, very boldly. We're just pointing them out to people. It's just that they've never seen them before. And once they see that and trace what's going on, within an hour, they're going to figure it out. Those are the kinds of things that we can do. Relative to our Support Your Local Police program that we are revitalizing, there is one little problem with that we're going to have to rectify on our side of the equation, and that is there are too many of these new people involved in these organizations that have come along in the last 3 or 4 years that don't like anything government, and they don't like the police either. And so we're going to have to show them that, well, wait a minute, look, if you don't like police, how would you like national police? If you think local policemen are corrupt, what about national police that are corrupt? You wouldn't have any recourse. So even those individuals, we're going to have to say, let's support your local police and keep them independent. And so, by the way, all those favors that you've got on the table are window stickers to put on your car, your front door, or something of that nature to show people that you support your local police and want to keep them independent. It took us several years to win that fight. It's going to take us several years to win it again, but we can do it. It's going to be a little bit tougher this time, but it's going to make the victory just that much sweeter. So all I want to do is to demonstrate to you we've got the same problems today that John Adams had, Samuel Adams had, all of these people had. And they sacrificed so much for our country. We don't need to sacrifice as much as they did in those years. Right now, we're not worried about being put into ships in New York Harbor, or our family interred there and starved to death while we're trying to escape the British troops all over the landscape, trying to get us to surrender by starving our wives and children like they did with some of the signers of the Declaration of Independence and that sort of thing. We still have the ability to get around and talk to people. So we need to do that before we lose that ability. I'd much rather throw a book at somebody than a bullet, wouldn't you? Pretty simple. That's assuming that they haven't gone through public school. At any rate, I want to thank you for all you're doing. You don't realize how important you are. You don't realize how far afield your influence ripples out across the pond until you sit in the headquarters of the John Birch Society and watch the results. We don't run up the flag, we don't blow off the cannon, we don't get out in the street and blow the bugle. We just quietly go about our work, getting out there, educating and organizing. And sometimes somebody in this state does not realize that a Bircher in that state was responsible for what they see, because they don't stand up and say that. And nor do we want them to necessarily. It'd be nice if we branded the society and everything we did, but we've had significant victories. We've been behind some very important movements in this country into where they have reached millions. We have members of the John Birch Society who have formed organizations that carry the Birch message through millions of people in those other organizations. It's incredible. Ed was just telling us yesterday of one instance. You know, we gave up counting how many people had seen the overview of America at 6 million about a year ago. And he just told us yesterday about an obscure website of some Tea Party group. Was it in New York? Okay, in New York, where they've had over 500,000 viewers of that overview on that website. That's significant. We don't know how many other websites match that, but it's the kind of thing you're starting to see out there is the Birch message is rippling out. This is a republic, not a democracy. Let's keep it that way. And a number of things like that reach all these people in these movements. It has been responsible philosophically for these movements with the help of the internet and your work out there. It's remarkable. I remember seeing Jack McManus going out at that alternative, I guess, convention of the Republican Party in Minneapolis 3 years ago. Here he is, he gets out there, and a lot of people don't know this, but the guy that was supposed to introduce him refused to do it because he was a Bircher. So somebody just said, I think it was just simply John F. McManus. And John walks out, hey, yeah, everybody recognized him. And we had a cameraman in the audience. Now that camera was one of those that has a little short boom with a mic on the end of it. And so here he is down in the crowd in front of the podium, and Jack says, so we can have less government. And all of a sudden you could hear the sound from all the people in the audience, more responsibility and with God's help a better world, in a group of 12,000 people. Is that influence or what? It's tremendous. That's the kind of thing that's happening out there. And we can give hope and change to these other people. We are giving hope and change to these other people. Let's turn this stuff around and make them eat it, okay? This is really, you know. And isn't this fun? You know, I've always liked ribbon people. And a little ribbon on the, you know, on the end of this is not a bad thing, I think, when you're aiming at the other side. Let's smile when we do it. Let's be ladies and gentlemen, but let's enjoy ourselves while we really give it to them, okay? Till I see you again, thanks a lot.